Holy cow. Interesting way to start things off. I guess that crow wasn't making all that noise for nothing. I was trying to catch up with all you guys' comments and stuff. You have a lot of interesting information while I was on the hike. And while I was doing that hike, I read the message here, like Frankie said, you and your wife appreciates it in terms of like those extra duck footages I put because you guys don't see those type of animals in your area like normally. It made me think why I wanted to share the drone footages and all before, because you just never know. Like not everyone has the same opportunity to be in the same area, so it could be like a unique experience for them. I don't know if you guys see raccoons usually, like in your everyday life over there. I saw this on the YouTube trending video today. It was about a sea lion dragging a girl into the water. Apparently that was here in BC. I guess they thought it would be a great idea to sit, really close to the animal just to get their selfie pics or whatever. And yeah, it wasn't a very good idea. I think at most it would be like with that raccoon. I try to keep my distance away. So if it does react in a crazy way, at least I have time to react. And I can capture drone footage for you guys. Such a different perspective. Even if it was just me flying here, like not actually going to the water, you just get such a different view of the world and everything like that. This makes me think again how this hysteria and putting all this paranoia into people's head and how like drones crash 90% of the time, whatever, just stops you from doing so many great things. Speaking of crashes and all, it must have been like a bad news day for airplane pilots. I first read this one, says 8 injured after airplane crashes into a truck at the Los Angeles airport. Yeah, it looked like basically the wing clipped the truck and it flipped it over and it injured 8 people. Holy cow. I mean, in relations to the drones and all that, again, like ever since this law came out, I've been more in tune with news like this. It just seems like every day there's more news about an actual plane crashing than an actual drone. And for all the Canadians say, well, that's not in Canada, so it's not related. Well, look at this today. Apparently another plane crashed. I guess it's like in the middle of the road or highway or whatever. Look how huge that is. Isn't that way more dangerous? You can't blame a drone for that one. And the funny thing is, think about this news in terms of an airplane crash. Like, this thing's a lot bigger, it's a lot more dangerous than a small drone, like say my Mavic. Yet I bet news-wise, if that tiny Mavic drone compared to this crashed, there would be a lot more media hysteria over that as opposed to this, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. It makes me think as well, if it's about safety, for the most part, where's all the hysteria telling people to phone 911s if they see any kind of recreational pilot, for example, that's flying around the area? Why not the same treatment? I mean, $3,000 fine up to fly a 250-gram drone in empty fields like this? Why not tell the public to come out and report every single pilot like this as well, like with the same amount of urgency? This actually made me think, as one of you guys, the viewers, actually sent me a video recently about an airplane that was flying around the area where you thought the pilot was being very reckless. Now keep in mind, I don't have any idea if this guy had permission to fly there or what the regulations are, but from what I observed, anyways, it looked like there's a road there with cars, there's a lot of power lines and all that, and it seemed like the guy was flying pretty low, where if this was a drone in comparison, people would be freaking out, like in terms of the Transport Canada saying, tell people to phone 911 over this. So as you can see from this video, the pilot was flying pretty low. Now, I'm not an aviation expert, so I'm not that good just by looking at video to determine the height. So the only way I can kind of guess it is to look at those transmission towers, for example. And it says, just based on like the Wikipedia, for example, the average height is from 15 to 55 meters. So kind of imagine that in terms of stacking how many of these towers would actually be needed to actually touch the airplane. And it looks like, again, it's pretty close to there. So like for an aviation pilot in Canada, I mean, can you eyeball this and say, well, this guy is like completely reckless, for example, like in general? Or do you think, no, that's perfectly safe? Interesting bird sound, whatever type of bird that is. To me personally anyways, like if the guy was doing anything wrong in terms of a recreational flyer, like even in general, it's kind of like what I said before, if someone's flying that low, like say in a place like this, I mean, you should be worried about that plane or whatever, not the drone. Even though there's a chance, like some people say, hey, that drone could crash into the airplane, is it really the drone you should be worried about or the plane? It was interesting to read how a lot of you guys felt in terms of the FFA, the fact that they can't force people to register anymore. Like a lot of people here were for it by the sounds of it. It's kind of interesting in terms of reading like other articles too, because some articles they say like they're not happy with it because they felt it's very reasonable, like the way it was done before. I was then reading how the Drone Manufacturer Alliance also felt in many ways the laws for the registration, it should be implemented in some fashion, like to keep people safe. And they said they'll be looking more into it. So again, it's kind of interesting to read the perspective. Because I know for me, I usually like talking like to the regular people, and to the regular people, the opinion is often so much different when you compare it to like other sources, like the bigger news outlets and all that. And with all that talk about registration and places like to fly, you guys basically linked an article about the DJI Firmware update, which to my knowledge is supposed to force people to update, I guess, the areas where they can and can't fly, because to my knowledge right now you can actually avoid it by not turning on your internet. And in some ways this is supposed to force people, so when you get to that area, for example, a no-fly zone like an airport, you will have to have internet connection in order for them to verify, I guess in some ways, that you can actually fly there, if that makes sense. For me that was really interesting since I fly a Mavic Pro, so I guess the general concern I would have, like most people, are okay, are we basically fully dependent on what they have in their database? So if their database is not accurate, then does that stop us from flying in places where we can? I guess as a funny example, maybe it's like someone's flying indoors in the airport for some kind of, I don't know, like they actually had permission for whatever reason to do that, but then this software would stop them from doing that, so that would be like the concern. For me, I was trying to understand this personally more, and I guess the best way to kind of see, okay, how overboard is this? For example, I looked at the safe zone fly maps from DJI, and I'm guessing this is essentially what the software uses to determine, hey, what's a no flight zone and what does it do? And so by the looks of it, I just went around like the Vancouver area here just to look at what it's like. And at first I checked everything, and you can see like, holy cow, like it seems like, is it going to be a no-fly zone everywhere in general? So at that point it's a little disappointing if that's how the program is, or the software rather. But then I started to uncheck stuff just to see like what it is. And as you can see, if you only limit it to like airports and all that, then it doesn't seem as bad. Actually, the interesting thing is that actually looks a lot more reasonable if it was just like the airports in many ways, as opposed to every single zone. So if I'm not mistaken, like the way it works now is if you're in like an area that they think it's a no-fly zone, even if you're in the middle of nowhere, like here for example, then it gives you a warning saying, are you sure like you have permission to fly? Or then all you do is click yes, and that's it. It lets you be on your way. So in that sense, it's not changing for those areas. But if it's like an airport now and that message comes up, instead of just being able to click say, yeah, I have permission, you'll need the actual internet to verify it. So it says like here, the enhanced warning zone of these zones, you will be prompted by GEO by the time of flight to unlock the zone, using the same steps as in the authorization zone, but you do not require a verified account or an internet connection at any time of your flight. So again, like I guess for areas like, if it looked like this for example, and it's, you know, it's not near an airport, then it's basically just, you know, click and you're done. But it says here for the yellow markers, the authorization in these zones, basically those require you to have the internet access and the registered account. Although for the red zones, like the restricted access, I'm a little confused like whether or not you would just need internet access, but it says here to contact the email. So I don't know if that means you have to email them every single time to say, hey, I have permission, or if initially you just send it to them, then afterwards they'll just like whitelist you on everything there. That's kind of interesting thought. I can see how this will be a very divided topic in many ways. I mean, how do you guys feel about this? I know for me as a regular user, if it's for things like airports and all that, like go for it. I guess that's kind of the compromise, to say like those restricted areas specifically, like they're extremely dangerous because a lot of, you know, that'll prevent people from buying the thing off the shelf and going there and flying it. So in a sense, that's good. If it gets too overblown, like in areas like this, then I would say no, it's kind of dumb. I guess at the same time, I guess people have the argument of, hey, you bought this item and it's yours, so you should be able to control it the way you desire. I guess in many ways, I guess it's like a car. I mean, your car doesn't stop you, like for example, geofencing or whatever to stop you from driving here. So that's the argument I would hear from those sides of the people. Again, for me, trying to think of it in both perspectives, like what's the best balance? I mean, as long as the process is okay, I guess, to get the approval, like for the restricted zones, and that's fine. I guess again, it just depends on whether or not someone's using a dinosaur Stone Age way to verify things like this. Like with the dumb laws here in Canada, like if you wanted to fly somewhere like even here right now, okay, I wanted to fly like a 250-gram drone, I would need probably like a 20-day process to get their SFOC or whatever, even though I'm not doing it for commercial use, like I'm just flying here with the drone over that. I did find this kind of funny though. It said if you did not update the firmware, I guess, for the drone to enable this to actually take place, then the software limits the drone to fly in a 50-meter radius and 30 meters in the air. So if you think about it, I was thinking, doesn't this actually make more sense as a default law for the Canadian drone laws? Like, would this have been so dangerous like, during the interim order just to have something like this as opposed to just like a complete ban of sorts? Again, that's assuming the narrative, again, it's safety and the fact that a drone can crash into an airplane or a helicopter or whatever. But I would assume if you're this low, again, you'd have more things to worry about as opposed to the drone. You should be worried about the aircrafts, like with all the news today. In relations to like firmware updates and safety as well, I was thinking even yesterday, I actually updated the Mavic Pro like to the latest firmware before I went on my little hike. And usually with firmware upgrades, I'm really paranoid in many ways. Like, okay, is this going to like fly like crazy now all of a sudden when everything was working perfect? And because of these dumb laws, I can't fly in open areas like this to test beforehand. So again, it brings to the point, again, it actually makes people like me or the situation less safe by not letting me fly in open fields. A lot of interesting discussions though. So hopefully Transport Canada wakes up and realizes everything is just, doesn't make sense. So retract them and get back to the drawing board. All right, see you guys later.